My mom confessed at Christmas that she swapped my DNA test results because she didn't want me to know who my real father is. I found out on Christmas that my mom literally printed a fake paternity test and swapped it, so I would spend almost 10 years believing the wrong man was my biological father, and now every time someone says the word family it feels like someone knocked the air out of me. I am 28, my mom is Elena, my dad is Thomas, and growing up I was told my biological father bailed when my mom was pregnant. That was it. No big mystery, just he left. Thomas met my mom when I was a few months old. He knew the situation, stuck around, and raised me. Everyone would say how sweet that was, how lucky I was, and I kind of built my whole identity on that, like I was the kid who got chosen instead of abandoned. Physically, I never matched either of them that well. My mom has super straight dark hair and sharp cheekbones. Thomas has darker skin, wider nose, very dark eyes. I ended up with lighter eyes and wavy hair that did not really belong to either side as far as I knew. Every time I pointed it out my mom would say genes are weird and bring up some great and I never met. I tried to ignore how much it bugged me, but it never really went away. At 19 it really started to annoy me, because every new doctor I saw would shove that clipboard at me and I would hit the father's medical history line and have to write unknown again. Meanwhile those spit in a tube kits were everywhere, videos of people finding long-lost cousins and whatever, so I started asking my mom about maybe doing one of those, not even because I wanted this big reunion, I just wanted something. She shut it down at first. She kept saying those companies were shady, that they keep your data forever, that I did not need that man in my head. Thomas was kind of caught in the middle. He told me he understood being curious but he was scared. He literally said one time that he did not want to lose me, and that hit me so hard I dropped it for months. Because how do you push for answers without feeling like you are stabbing the guy who has been there since you were in diapers? Eventually I wore them down enough that we compromised on a straight-up paternity test, not the fun ancestry thing, just is Thomas my biological father or not. My mom ordered this legit-looking kit. We did the swabs at the kitchen table in our old townhouse, narrow place, old cabinets. My mom read the instructions out loud like 3 times. She watched me swab my cheek, watched Thomas swab his. She sealed the envelopes herself and made me sign my name across the flap like we were closing on a house. She insisted she would drop it in the mail on her way to work. I did not think anything of it. That was just how she is, very controlling about details. 2 weeks later the envelope from the lab showed up. I still remember exactly how that felt. My mom got the mail, called me over all dramatic, handed me the envelope. I opened it. There was this sheet with our names and a bunch of numbers, and at the bottom it said Thomas was the father with a probability over 99%. My legs honestly went weak. Thomas grabbed me in this huge hug. My mom started sobbing. I cried too, part relief, part guilt for ever doubting. We shoved the paper into a little drawer in the hall desk and basically never brought it up again. After that, whenever I would randomly bring up my biological father, my mom would shut it down fast and remind me we already did the test. Thomas is my dad, end of story. It bugged me sometimes, but I forced myself to accept it. I kept telling myself I was lucky, that I could stop wondering now, and for a while I actually believed that. Now I am 28, engaged to my partner Alex. We live in this slightly crooked upstairs place above an upholstery shop. The floors tilt just enough that pens roll off the table if you are not careful. The radiators bang when the heat kicks on. It is not fancy, but it is ours. Alex and I have been together 4 years. We started wedding planning this year, arguing about guest lists and music and whether we really need a cake topper, that kind of stuff. We were talking about who would walk me down the aisle and it was never even a question in my head. It was going to be Thomas, obviously. Christmas was at my parents' place like always. They live in a loft in this old brick warehouse by the river, high ceilings, big windows. You freeze if you sit too close to the glass. My mom goes overboard with decorations. She had a real tree wedged between a support post and the TV stand, white lights along the railings, candles on every flat surface. It smelled like cinnamon and whatever she simmered on the stove all afternoon. It was a small group, me and Alex, my parents, my godfather Julian and his wife Sarah, no kids, no extra cousins, just the usual core people. Julian has been around since forever. He and Thomas have been best friends since way before I was born. He is the one who always felt more like the fun uncle type. He taught me basic chords on a keyboard, came to every school band thing, bought me way too many music books for birthdays. He and Sarah live a few blocks from my parents, second floor over a print shop. Dinner was normal at first, my mom bossing everyone around in a nice way, Thomas telling these corny seasonal jokes, Alex fitting into the chaos. There was nothing weird. At one point Julian did a little toast to me and Thomas, saying he could not wait to see my dad walk me down the aisle. Thomas looked down like he was about to cry in a good way. I squeezed his arm. It was this soft moment, and apparently also the exact wrong button to push without realizing it. After we moved over to the couch and chairs with dessert, we had something random on the TV with the sound off just for background. Sarah started talking about this new guy who moved into their building. She said every time she passes him on the stairs she thinks it is me for a second. Same eyes, same jaw. She laughed and said I must have clones walking around. Alex made a joke about how with all these DNA tests people keep finding surprise siblings. Said luckily I had already done the whole paternity thing and it was boring. Nothing dramatic. I said yeah, we did that years ago and it just confirmed what we thought. And the second I said that, the whole vibe in the room shifted. It is hard to explain. It just felt like everyone got quieter half a second too fast. My mom's face went tight. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Julian stopped smiling and stared at the floor. Thomas frowned and looked between us. Alex looked confused because he could tell he had hit some nerve and had no idea why. I tried to brush it off and kind of jokingly asked my mom if she still had that old test somewhere because I thought it would be funny to put a copy in our wedding book. Like here is proof. This guy is officially stuck with me. She said no in this clipped way, like I had asked for something super inappropriate, then said she did not know where it was anyway and that it was not really scrapbook material. Thomas asked what was going on because he picked up the tone too. I said I was literally just asking about a piece of paper. My mom told me to drop it. There was this edge in her voice that made my stomach drop. So of course I did not drop it. I asked if there was something about that test she had not told me. I tried to keep my voice calm. She said some things are better left alone. I said that usually means there is something ugly hiding there, and that was it. She kind of folded in on herself and then said she switched the results. She said it like she had rehearsed saying it, but her hands were shaking. She said the real test had shown that Thomas was not my biological father, that she had gotten the mail at work, opened the real report, freaked out, and decided she could not let that be my truth. She admitted she had used some template from the lab's website, typed in different numbers on her office computer, printed it on good paper, slid it into the envelope, and handed that version to me. The room just froze. I looked at Thomas. He looked like someone had cut the floor out from under him. Julian looked like he was going to throw up. Alex squeezed my knee so hard it almost hurt. I actually laughed once because my brain could not process that my mom had just said that out loud. I asked if she was serious. She said she did it to protect me and protect Thomas. She started rambling about how at 19 I was obsessed with finding my biological father, how she knew that man did not want us, how she could not bear watching me chase someone who would reject me. I asked who my biological father actually is. She said it did not matter, that he did not want to be involved, that dragging him into my life now would blow everything up for nothing. She kept saying Thomas is your real dad, over and over, like if she just repeated it enough, the rest would go away. And yeah, Thomas is my real dad in every way that counts, but that does not mean she gets to rewrite biology on a printer. I told her straight that once I turned 18, lying about my own DNA stopped being her decision, and forging a test was insane. Thomas finally spoke up and asked her if she had really done that, actually printed a fake result. She tried to grab his hand. He pulled away, very calmly said he needed air, and walked out toward the fire escape. No yelling, just gone. I told my mom if she refused to tell me who my biological father is, I was going to redo the test with a different lab and start from there. She went pale and told me that would not help, that not everyone is in those databases, that I would just hurt people for nothing. I said at least then I would know for sure about Thomas and not be relying on whatever story she preferred. We left not long after. There was no big dramatic walkout. I just put my shoes on while my mom followed me, begging me not to do anything rash, saying we could talk when everyone calmed down. Julian stood in the kitchen doorway looking gutted. Sarah was pretending to wash already clean dishes. Thomas was still out on the fire escape staring out at the river. I could not even make myself walk over to say anything. I just left. On the drive home I went back and forth between numb and furious. Every detail from that first test ran through my head on a loop. How she insisted on mailing it, how she hovered while I opened the envelope, how hard she cried when I read the fake result. I felt stupid for not reading any of that as weird at the time, which is not fair to myself because why would I have suspected my own mom of printing fake lab reports? But that is where my brain went. The next morning I ordered another paternity test from a different company, paid extra to get it fast. Alex sat across from me at the table and just watched. He asked if I was sure. I said I did not see how I could not do it now. He asked later what I was actually hoping for. Deep down, did I want it to somehow say my mom was wrong and Thomas really is my biological father? Or had I already accepted that he probably is not, and it sucked how much I did not know the answer? When the kid showed up, I drove it straight to Thomas's job. He works as a maintenance supervisor for a bunch of buildings. I went down to the basement level where his little office is. It is this cramped room with shelves of parts and a metal desk. Smells like dust and metal. He looked exhausted, like he had not slept properly since Christmas. I told him what the kit was and asked if he was willing to do it with me. Properly this time, no one in between. He got quiet for a second and then said, if it would help me sleep at night, yes. We did the swabs right there, leaning on his workbench, sealed everything. I filled out the forms. We walked upstairs together and handed the envelope straight to the receptionist in the front office. We watched her put it in the outgoing mail tray. No detours to my mom. No chance for anyone to mess with it. It felt weirdly like we were both finally doing something we should have done years ago. While we waited for the results, my mom bombarded me with calls and texts. She kept switching between apologizing and telling me I was overreacting, then turning around and saying she had saved me from a lot of pain. She begged me not to go through with more testing, said it would destroy Thomas, said I was about to get married and should focus on my future. I ignored most of it. I did not trust myself to talk to her without saying something I could not take back. Julian texted me once, very short, saying he was there if I wanted the full story, that there were details I did not know yet, and that he would tell me when I was ready. I stared at that message a long time, because my mom telling him to stay out of it on Christmas suddenly made a lot more sense, and not in a good way. And that is where I was until the envelope showed up. Update 2 weeks later. So the new test results came in, and it turns out my mom was not lying about the result itself, just about literally everything around it. The envelope showed up in our upstairs mailbox with a bunch of junk flyers. Alex brought it in and put it on the table. My hands were shaking before I even sat down. The report looked very official and very boring at the same time. Lots of charts and numbers I do not understand. But the thing that actually matters is the line at the bottom. The probability of paternity for Thomas, which was basically 0. He is not my biological father. Seeing that on paper did this weird thing in my head where I was both calm and furious at once. Calm because some part of me clearly already knew. Furious because if my mom had just been honest when I was 19, or honestly even before that, we could have processed this together instead of me finding out because she blurted it in the middle of Christmas dessert. She held this information for years and then added a fake report on top like icing on a rotten cake. I took the report straight to Thomas at his job. I told him, and he just sat there for a second with his eyes closed, then nodded. He said he had known this was a real possibility the whole time, because when my mom first told him she was pregnant she admitted there had been someone else around the same time. He chose to step up anyway. He said he did not push for a test back then because he was scared of exactly this answer. And once he was already in dad mode, the idea of putting that on paper and risking my mom using it to cut him out felt worse than not knowing. He also had no idea she had actually done a lab test when I was 19 and then faked the result. When I told him that part he looked sick, like he was going to be physically ill. He said he had trusted her, even with a messy timeline, and that he never imagined she would go as far as forging a scientific report. His whole thing was always that being my dad was a choice he made, not something he wanted to double-check in a lab, so he just never went there. We sat in that tiny office with boxes of spare parts around us and talked about what this changes, and what it does not. I told him flat out he is still the one I think of as my dad. His name is still the one I want on my marriage license. Nothing on that paper erases the fact that he got up in the night when I was sick and showed up to everything important. He started crying at that, which nearly broke me. He kept saying he did not want me to feel like I had to pick between him and some guy who had not been around. I told him this was not about picking, this was about knowing. Then of course we had to circle back to the question hanging over everything, who is my biological father? My mom refused to say, just kept repeating that he did not want to be involved, that she promised him she would never drag him in. Thomas stared at the report for a while, then quietly told me I should talk to Julian. He did not say Julian is your father, but the way he said his name, the weight in it, plus a million small memories, kind of connected themselves. I texted Julian and asked if we could talk somewhere without other people around. He suggested the roof of his building because Sarah was on a long video call with her relatives and he did not want to have a conversation like this in the hallway with neighbors walking through. So I drove over there and climbed up to this sad little rooftop with mismatched chairs and planters. It was freezing and windy. I was already shaking before he even opened the door. He came up bundled in a thick coat, hands shoved in his pockets, and he looked weirdly nervous for a guy I have known my whole life. I asked him straight out if he is my biological father. He closed his eyes for a second, then nodded, and that was it. That one little movement changed everything. He told me he and my mom used to date on and off in their 20s, that it was messy, lots of breaking up and getting back together. Around the time she got pregnant with me, they had been seeing each other but not exclusively. She told him there was a chance I was his, and he freaked out. He was working nights at random music jobs, barely paying rent, and he told her he was not ready to be a dad. She stopped calling him, and a couple months later he met Thomas at a party as my mom's new boyfriend. According to him, my mom told both of them the timeline was fuzzy, that Thomas might be the father, that Julian might be. Everyone just kind of chose the version that made their life simplest. Thomas stepped up, Julian backed away, telling himself Thomas was probably the dad. He said he convinced himself that being my godfather and family friend was enough, that biology did not matter, which sounds like a nice excuse but is not so nice when you sit with it. When I was about 10, he and my mom apparently had a serious talk where she told him she had done some kind of early test and that he was almost definitely my biological father. He said he asked if they were going to tell me or Thomas, and she said no, that Thomas had adopted me, that I knew Thomas as my dad, and she was not going to rip that up. She basically told him he could either stay in my life in the role he already had or disappear, and he chose to stay, quietly. I asked if Sarah knew. He said she knew there was a chance he had a kid out there before they got married, and that it was probably me, but they never had paperwork. It was this thing they did not talk about much, which is honestly wild to me, like your husband might have a whole child and you just keep it as this weird background fact, but whatever, that is between them. I asked why now, why he suddenly wanted to admit all of this, and that was when he told me about the heart stuff. About 6 months ago he collapsed on the stairs, ended up in the cardiac unit, got diagnosed with a hereditary heart condition that probably killed his own dad, and suddenly doctors were asking for his kids' histories, and he had to sit there knowing there was a decent chance he had passed this on to me without ever telling me it existed. He said that realization messed him up. He started pushing my mom to tell me the truth, at least enough so I could get checked. She refused, still stuck on this idea that she was protecting me. They argued about it for months. Then Christmas happened. Sarah made that joke about me looking like their new neighbor. Alex said the thing about DNA tests. I asked about the old result, and my mom just snapped under all the built-up pressure, in the worst possible way she could have chosen. I stood there on that roof listening to all of this, watching my breath in the air, and I just kept thinking how many chances these adults had to do the right thing, or at least the less awful thing, and how many times they decided to avoid conflict instead. I asked Julian why, even if he was scared to blow up the dad label years ago, he did not at least call me when he got that diagnosis and say, hey, as your godfather I want you to know there is a heart thing in my family you should check for. He did not really have an answer beyond I was scared and I thought I had more time. I left feeling weirdly calm and very tired. I told Thomas that evening over the phone that Julian is my biological father. He was quiet for a long moment, then said he had suspected it for years, especially with how involved Julian always was in my life. But he did not want to see it. Hearing it out loud still hurt, both because it confirmed he is not my bio dad and because it means his best friend of decades kept this from him. He said he needed space from Julian and from my mom, which is fair. He moved his stuff into the little den off the living room at the loft and started sleeping in there. My mom, on the other hand, turned all her energy onto me, telling me I had ruined her marriage by digging, saying she had done the best she could with what she had, that back then being a single mom felt like a death sentence. She said if she had told the whole truth, both men would have left and she would have had nothing. Maybe she is right about how scared she was, but she is the one who turned that into decades of lies. That part is on her. On top of all of that, I had to go get my heart checked. My doctor ordered tests. I spent a bunch of time in waiting rooms, filling out forms, explaining that actually my dad is my stepdad, my biological father is my godfather, my mom faked a paternity test. It sounds made up even when I say it out loud to medical staff. My results so far show some markers that mean I need to be monitored, but nothing immediate, which is something at least. We put a lot of wedding planning on hold while this was happening. It felt ridiculous to argue about napkins when I was trying to figure out who I am and who is sitting where at the ceremony without causing a war. And then Sarah called me a few days ago and knocked the next domino over. She said Julian collapsed again, this time in their kitchen. He is in the hospital, awake but shaken. The doctors want to do a procedure soon, not the worst case, but not nothing. And apparently he has been asking to see me. He wants to get his legal stuff in order, wills, and all that, and he wants to formally acknowledge me as his daughter before he goes under, in case something goes wrong. So now I have to decide if I am going to walk into a hospital room, hold the hand of the man who helped create me and then stood on the sidelines of my life as the fun godfather, and sign paperwork that basically admits he is my biological father on paper, while the man who raised me is sleeping on a fold-out couch because that secret blew his marriage up. There is no version of this that is simple. Final update, 3 months later. It has been about 3 months since I posted the first part of this, and things look completely different now, not magically fixed, just different. I did go to the hospital. The cardiac floor is high up in this huge concrete building, bright lights, everything smelling like disinfectant. I met Sarah by the elevators. She already looked worn out from worry. She hugged me and kept thanking me for coming, which just made me feel more awkward because I still had a lot of anger mixed in with everything else. Julian was in a small room hooked up to monitors and in 4, the heart monitor beeping away next to him. He looked older and smaller than I have ever seen him. Hospital gowns will do that to anybody. He tried to sit up straighter when I walked in, winced, and gave up. I sat down in the plastic chair next to the bed, and for a second we just kind of stared at each other. It is wild looking at someone's face and seeing your own features aged up 20 or 30 years. He apologized again, properly this time, without hiding behind excuses. He said he was sorry for not stepping up when my mom first told him there was a chance I was his, sorry for staying quiet when she confirmed it later, sorry for not telling me the second he found out about the heart condition. He called his behavior cowardly, and for once did not try to spin it. He said he did not expect me to forgive him or suddenly call him dad. He just could not go into this procedure without saying it to my face. Then he pulled out this folder from the little table next to the bed. It had my name written on the front. Inside were draft papers, updated will, forms acknowledging me as his biological daughter, medical info releases so doctors can share information with me long term, all that fun adult stuff. He said a social worker helped him put it together. He wanted me to have options. He told me very clearly that I did not have to sign any of it, that he was not trying to guilt me, just that after spending most of my life pretending he was not my father, the least he could do now was put it in writing and give me access to what I needed medically and legally if I chose to take it. I told him I was not making any decision sitting in a hospital chair with nurses walking past. He agreed and actually told me to take it to someone neutral, a lawyer or whatever, to make sure it was really in my best interest, not just his way of making himself feel better before surgery. I took the folder home feeling like I was carrying a brick. I went to a legal clinic at a community center a few days later, sat in this multipurpose room with plastic tables and kids yelling in the next room, and had a lawyer walk me through what the forms actually did. She explained that Thomas legally adopted me years ago, so none of this changes that. His name stays where it is. We are not undoing anything. What Julian can do is sign a statement acknowledging paternity, give me rights to medical information as family, and put me in his will. It is basically adding information and access, not swapping one dad out for another. I took that back to Thomas and laid it all out. We sat at his tiny table in his new studio apartment above a hardware store. The place is small but feels weirdly more like him than the loft ever did. He listened, asked questions, clearly hated having to even think about sharing that title with Julian, but he also said he would never be the one to block me from getting information or support that might matter. He said if signing those papers helps me medically or gives me some financial security, someday, I should do it, and he would deal with his own feelings separately. My mom's reaction when she found out I was even considering it was the opposite. She called me and went straight into accusing me of betraying Thomas, of chasing money. She said if I let Julian put his name on any paper with mine, I was erasing the man who raised me. I told her Thomas himself had told me to do what was best for me. She did not like hearing that. She hung up, then sent me a long text about being young and scared and making mistakes. I did not answer. I do not have the energy to keep defending basic facts. In the end I signed the papers in a little meeting room at the hospital with a notary present, Julian on one side of the table, Sarah on the other, Alex behind me. The forms were dry and boring, lots of lines to initial, but the emotional weight was real. Julian signed a statement saying he is my biological father, gave me rights to his medical information, updated his will so that if something happens to him, I am legally one of the people who has a say and who inherits. It felt less like some big romantic moment and more like cleaning up paperwork that should have been done right decades ago. His surgery went ahead. It was serious, but it went as planned. They fixed what they needed to. He will always have this heart issue, but he is not in immediate danger the way he was. I visited him once more while he was recovering, and we mostly talked about normal things, which was honestly kind of a relief. We did not try to force some instant deep father-child bond. We just sat there, two people who share DNA, trying to figure out how that fits into lives that were already built. Meanwhile, Thomas filed for legal separation. He moved fully out of the loft into that little studio. My mom stayed in the big place. She texts me a lot, usually long emotional messages about how she never meant to hurt anyone, that she did everything out of love. She still does not seem to get that love without honesty is not actually the gift she thinks it is. My contact with her is limited now. I see her for coffee sometimes in public places. We keep it surface level. I do not bring up Julian or the test or the separation, because every time I have tried it turns into her rewriting history, and I cannot listen to that anymore. Alex and I had to actually make a decision about the wedding at some point. The original big hall we had put a deposit on did not feel right anymore. It fit the old picture of my family, not the reality. We ended up switching to this old tram depot that got turned into an event space. High ceilings, big windows, old tracks still faintly visible in the floor. It felt like a good metaphor accidentally, something repurposed. Still carrying old lines but being used for something new. The whole who walks me down the aisle thing was still hanging over me. Every option felt like I was sending some huge public message. Pick Thomas, and is that a slap in Julian's face now that I know? Include Julian, and is that a knife in Thomas's back? Involve my mom and everyone will be uncomfortable. Alex was the one who finally said, "Do you actually have to have anyone walk you?" And once he said it out loud, it was like something clicked. I do not. I am an adult. Nobody needs to hand me off to anyone. So we decided we would each walk in on our own, from opposite sides, meet in the middle, no one giving anyone away. Our officiant, one of Alex's friends who is licensed to do ceremonies, thought it was great. We wrote a simple little ceremony that actually felt like us, scrap the old script, make our own. On the day, the tram depot was full of folding chairs and mismatched glass jars with flowers, light coming in through the high windows, people talking and laughing. There was still that weird undercurrent because of all the family stuff, but it did not dominate the room the way I had been afraid it would. I waited just out of sight, heart pounding in a good way for once. Music started, nothing traditional, just a song we both liked played on a keyboard. I walked out on my own from one side while Alex walked from the other. As I went down the middle, I could not help glancing at that front section. Thomas was sitting there in a simple suit, hands clasped, eyes red already. When I caught his eye, you could see all the history there, him teaching me to ride a bike, helping with school projects, showing up for everything. I gave him a small nod, and he nodded back, and that tiny moment said more than anything a speech could have. A few seats down, Julian sat with Sarah, thinner after surgery but clearly still here. He looked at me like he was still a little shocked I existed, like he has been seeing me for years but only just now really seeing me. I did not linger on him, but I did not ignore him either. He is part of this now, whether any of us like it or not. My mom was in the row right behind them, in a dark dress, clutching her bag, watching everything. She looked out of place in a way she never used to. She used to be the one running every event. Now she was just another person in a chair. I did not make eye contact for long, not out of spite, just because this day finally was not about her choices, it was about mine. Alex and I met in the middle, took each other's hands, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was not reacting to something someone else had done. I was doing something I chose. The officiant talked about building a life together, about honesty, about making decisions based on truth instead of what is easiest to say in the moment. Nothing fancy, but it hit hard given everything that led up to it. We said our vows. Both stumbled a bit, everyone laughed. It was imperfect and felt real. At the reception afterward, people ate, danced badly, kids ran along the faint tram tracks in the floor, treating them like race lanes. At one point I saw Thomas and Julian standing near one of the old route maps, talking quietly, not laughing, but not fighting either, just two men trying to figure out how to exist in the same space after a bomb went off between them. After a while they both looked over at me, almost at the same time, and each gave this tiny nod, not some big movie moment, just a small sign that maybe, slowly, we are going to figure out what this looks like. By the end of the night, most people had gone. Alex and I helped stack chairs and gather up leftover programs. The flowers were already starting to droop a little. The hall was quieter, less like a venue, more like an old building again. We pulled the big door closed together. The old metal wheel squeaked on the track. The latch clicked, and for the first time since my mom admitted what she did with that test, I felt like my life was not completely defined by her secret anymore. It was still part of the story, but it was not the whole thing.